Well, today we're going to wrap up this series and this discussion that we've been having about our need and the blessing that is community. Here's what we've said. That you and I, we were not created to live in isolation, but that we were created for community. We were created to experience the blessing of people around us who care about us. We care for them in a real sense of community. Indeed, you and I were created with this need for community, and that this is a confession of what is true and what I know is true. That I need us, and that you need us. That's not easy. It's hard, and we know this, and we want this. The hard part is we've tried it, and we have some scars to show it. It's hard, and so really what we've been talking about in this conversation is Lord, teach us how to go about experiencing community in good, healthy ways, and help us to do it even when it's hard. And so today we're gonna wrap up this conversation. We'll do something else next week. And so to do that, I want to go back to kind of where the conversation started. And where it started was when I noticed this summer an article come across my news feed about a brand new research study that the results were just published on the subject of loneliness. And the interesting thing that although we are more connected than we have ever been, digitally, socially, throughout the world, that levels of loneliness in some cases are higher than they've ever been. In fact, here was the interesting part of the study. When asked, how often, if ever, do you feel lonely, the percentages of those who said they always or often feel lonely looked like this. The total for the research study was 20% of the total population said that I often or always feel lonely. The focal point of the article that I read noticed that the Millennials, the young adult generation right now, noted 30% of Millennials, 30% of young adults said that they often or always feel lonely. Whereas only 20% of Gen X, kind of middle adulthood, that's my generation, only 20% of Gen X said they often or always feel lonely, and only 15% of baby boomers said they often or always feel lonely. And looking at these elevated numbers of our young adults who've grown up with cell phones in their hands and being connected and are so connected, more connected than ever, are the most disconnected, lonely generation. And we need to talk about this. You know, what was interesting though is when I read further and dug deeper into some of the other questions that were asked, these are the ones that really bothered me. Of the millennials, the young adults, we discovered this, that 27% of millennials said they have no close friends. 30% millennials said they have no best friend. And then here's the one that it just hurts my heart. 22% of millennials said they have no acquaintances. Now, maybe there's a difference of definition of how we're defining acquaintances, but that's painful to read about because that tells me there's significant levels of loneliness, and not just levels, but like millions represented by this number who would say they're lonely, they're lost. They know I need us, but I don't know where to find it, how to get it, how to experience it. So today, as we're going to wrap up this discussion, we're going to do something just a little bit different in thinking again about this. And sometimes for me, when I read something that I don't quite understand, I'm kind of a data gatherer, and I want to go talk to somebody who's an expert. And so with this one, I was like, well, let's ask a millennial, okay? So Jess, come on up here. Do you guys know Jess? Yeah. Okay, we love Jess, don't we? Yeah, some of our middle school, high school students. Jess helped lead a middle school small group this summer that was pretty fun and awesome, and invested in a lot of our students. And maybe at 10:30, if you're a regular 10:30, almost every week this summer, Jess has been downstairs leading in kids, and we've given her a lot of experience there. She's our summer intern. You're going to be a junior this year?
Yes.
Junior at University of Washington, up in Seattle.
Yep.
And she's been on staff as our full-time intern, has a great heart for the Lord and for people. And so you're technically not a millennial. You're a little bit too young to be a millennial, but close enough. You're the closest I've got. So, you got to help me out here. So, like I said, let's ask someone who's there. So Jess, tell us, from what you're seeing, what are we seeing on university campuses Young adults, emerging young adults. What are we seeing on university campuses related to this search for community?
Yeah. So what I've noticed is at the University of Washington, we have this slogan or this motto that we study or live by, and it's be boundless. Now, being boundless means you want to be better than the person in front of you and definitely better than the person behind you. Now, that creates a sense of isolation and an intense sense of competition. And so those two combined create competition, isolating people. And then these people, they want to feel special, they want to feel loved, they want community, so they don't care how it happens, how they create the sense of community, so long as it happens. And so many times that results in artificial relationships, and they don't last. So that's what I've noticed on campus.
So it's kind of like we in encouraging our young adults to be boundless, we've kind of created this culture of competition that has actually isolated some of our young adults, okay? But still that need and that desire for community.
It's still there.
But then because of the isolation, young adults, you're seeing that they're finding it and experimenting with it in unhealthy ways. Tell us a little bit about that. I learned a lot in this conversation this week, and I was like, you got to share this. What are some of the ways that you see university students and young adults experimenting with community and relationships in some unhealthy ways?
Yeah, so there are many, but I'm going to talk about 3. First one being hookups. Now, for many of you guys who don't know what hookups are you go late out one night or maybe during the day. You go out with one person, you go out drinking, you go out partying, you go do whatever you want to do, but then you come back with them for the night. You spend the night with them, and then the following morning, nothing happened. You pretend like nothing happened. And you probably never talk to the person again, or you do, but it didn't mean anything. The second one is cuffing season. Now, cuffing season lasts from the months of October to the end of March. And what that is that it starts to get chilly. Christmas starts coming up, the holidays start coming up, and so do events. And so you want to take someone to these events because you don't want to show up alone, right? So you find the first person that you see, and you're like, hey, we're cuffed. So you're cuffed together for the season, and it's artificial. It's just because it's there, it's convenient, and that's an unhealthy way. Another one is fake friendships, and fake friendships work like this. It's just when either party is in it just to get something out of it. Now, I was recently in a fake friendship this last winter, and it was someone who I had known all throughout high school. 4 years of high school, and we had been really close friends. And then we had a disagreement during winter, and we, instead of talking about it, we decided, you know what, we'll just let it slide. We'll just not talk about it, and it'll sort itself out. And so what happened was that didn't happen. I noticed that over time, it turned into this toxic, what can I get out of your relationship? And she would text me when she needed notes. She would call me when she wanted to study together. And it wasn't because she wanted to spend time with me. It was because she wanted to exploit a resource that I was offering, that I could offer her. And I fed this because I was like, I want my friend back, so I'm going to keep feeding this, and eventually it'll sort itself out. And so over time, we both realized that this wasn't working. So we, like mature adults that we are, we decided we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this. And so we did. We sat down and we talked about it, and we're like, this is like not going anywhere. This is turning into an artificial relationship. We've got to talk this through, and we've got to fix it. And we did. And now our friendship is only getting stronger because of that. And that's because we've taken the time to go through the rough patches and just sort it through.
Yeah. But you experienced for a little while that
yes, we experienced
being
that.
Manipulated, exploited, just in it for what somebody else can get out of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I bet you didn't know about cuffing season. I didn't either, right? And I'm like, what? And she had to explain to me like 3 times because I'm old and, I don't understand things like that. And then she sent me the article about it. I'm like, okay, I'm convinced. Wow, it's crazy, okay? Now, maybe you haven't heard of that, and you don't see anybody doing that, but you know what? All of us, regardless of our age or generation, we can relate to conversations about fake relationships when people are only in it for what they can get out of it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a community killer. And here's the good news, though. And here's what we're going to talk about today. It doesn't have to be this way. No. For young adults or for the rest of us. And what's interesting is when we look in Scripture, we see some examples of both of these. We see some examples in the same time period, a group of people, and within that group of people, there were some folks who were only in it for what they could get out of it, these fake artificial relationships, and someone who led the way in modeling real, healthy relationships and community. That's what we're going to talk about today. Well, it's not really what we're going to talk about, but it's what Jess is going to talk about. So Jess, let's open Scripture together. Share with us what God's laid on your heart. Let's talk about real community today.
Let's do it. All right, so hang in there with me, please. All right, so we're going to talk. We see these relationships, these real relationships, and these artificial relationships in Scripture. And today, we're going to focus on the relationship of the people and God. And so we're going to look at the story of Moses, and we're going to look at the Israelites' relationship with God, and then we're going to look at Moses' relationship with God. So we're going to create a contrast between those two. So that's the setup. All right, so let's get into it. So God miraculously saves these Israelites from Egypt, right? He sees that these people, they're being exploited and they're being tortured as slaves. So he sees this and he's like, you know what, my people cannot be treated like this. So he talks to Moses and he's like, Moses, I need you to help me save my people. Now, Moses, he decides to go through this, but the Israelites, even though God miraculously saved them and takes them through this journey in the desert and protects them from everything in the desert, they aren't content. And at the first sign of struggle, they start complaining and they start grumbling. And the first instance that we see is when they begin to get thirsty in the desert. And so they start complaining, and let's look at what happens. So God told Moses to strike a rock. He hears that these people are complaining. And so he tells Moses, strike a rock twice, and water will come gushing out. So Moses does just that. Moses heads over, strikes the rock twice, water comes out, and these people, you would think, that after water comes gushing out of rock, I mean, that doesn't happen every single day. These people would be like, God is real and he's watching over us, but no, that was not enough. So we look at Exodus 17:3. And it says the following, but tormented by thirst, they continued to argue with Moses. Why did you bring us out of Egypt? Are you trying to kill us, our children, and our livestock with thirst? So it was not enough that God had brought them out of Egypt, rescued them, and had been taking care of them that whole time. They still wanted more. Why? Because they were in it for what they could get out of it. It was an artificial, fake relationship. Now, we look further on in the story, and these people start to get hungry, and again, they start to complain. These Israelites. They complain. And so God, he's like, all right, I hear you're complaining. And so let's look at Exodus 16:3. It says, if only the Lord had killed us back in Egypt, they moaned. There we sat around pots filled with meat and ate all the bread we wanted. But now you have brought us into the wilderness to starve us all to death. God has been watching over them. He's been giving them water. He's been feeding them. He's been taking care of them, but that's not enough. So God decides, you know what? I'm going to rain some food from heaven. Now, food, I've never seen food rain from heaven. So that, I'd be like, wow, that doesn't happen every day. So God rains this food, and he tells them, only take what you need for the day. Do not take more than what you need. But these Israelites, being Israelites, they decide that they're going to take a lot more than what they need. And so they put them in jars. They're like, all right, we'll wake up the following morning. It'll be good. So they put them in the jars, and then they wake up the following morning, open it, and they see a bunch of maggots crawling inside of the manna. And since it's got maggots, it stinks. So just imagine the stench that was coming out of it and like the gross visual of it. Well, even though God was feeding them and taking care of them, that wasn't enough. Why? Because it was a fake relationship. They were in it to see what they could get out of it. Then several months later, God is still providing food and is providing water and is providing care for them. And we look at Numbers 11:4-6. Then the foreign rabble who were traveling with the Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt, and the people of Israel also began to complain. Oh, for some meat, they exclaimed. We remember the fish we used to eat for free in Egypt, and we had all the cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic we wanted. But now, our appetites are gone. All we ever see is this manna. So God is providing. He's taking care of them. But that wasn't enough. They wanted more because it was a fake relationship. To them, it was only to see, what can I get out of this? What's in it for me? Now, like many of the students at the university, we want real relationships and we want real community. But our natural tendency is to act according to our needs and desires. But it does not have to be this way. That's the good news. And we look later at Moses. Moses is an illustration of what a real relationship should look like. We see that in his relationship with God. And many times we look at Moses as this super spiritual hero that we can never be like, and he's just too good. We can't be like him. So sometimes we give up. But let's look. Moses is actually a lot like us, because when God goes to Moses in the encounter at the burning bush, Moses isn't like, oh God, here I am, let's do this. He is hesitant from the start. But let's look at his response in Exodus 3:11. But Moses protested to God, who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? So instantly he's hesitant, right? He's not like, let's go. Yeah, I trust in you, God. We can do this. No, he's like, who am I? Why me? So he's hesitant, but he ends up trusting God. But just because he trusts God does not mean that it was easy. And if we go back to the story where the Israelites begin to complain, we see that these people were actually really hard to lead, because at the first sign of struggle, they started to complain. Now, if we look later on in the story at Moses number 14 through 14, God and Moses go through a rough patch. And rough patches are part of relationships, right? So if we look, and Moses said to the Lord, why are you treating me, your servant, so harshly? Have mercy on me. What did I do to deserve the burden of all these people? Did I give birth to them? Did I bring them into the world? Why did you tell me to carry them in my arms like a mother carries a nursing baby? How can I carry them to the land you swore to give their ancestors? Where am I supposed to get meat for all these people? They keep whining to me, saying, give us meat to eat. I can't carry all these people by myself. The load is far too heavy. So essentially what Moses is doing here is he's complaining, right? He's like, God, why? But the difference between Moses' complaining and the Israelites complaining is that Moses has taken the time to go through the rough patches. He isn't saying, God, you know what? I can't do this. I'm done. He isn't saying that. But the Israelites, very different from Moses, the first sign of struggle, they're like, we're done. Like, you don't take care of us. You don't watch over us. You're just not taking care of us. You just aren't a good God, But Moses is different because he's not in it to see what he can get out of it. He's in it because he wants to be in it, and he's willing to go through the rough patches. Now, have any of you guys seen Friends? I'll be there for you. Yeah? All right, well, it's one of my favorite shows. I finally got my brother hooked onto it, so I'm really proud of myself. So there's this episode where Monica and Chandler, they're really fresh in their relationship, and they decide to go away for the weekend because they're like, we need a time to bond with each other without the rest of the friends, because they tend to get in the way. And so they go away, I think it's to Philadelphia. And so they go away to Philadelphia, and Monica, she's like, we're going to go away, and we're going to spend some time in the city. Now, Chandler decides, you know what, there's a football game, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch the football game, and you can go out if you want. So they have a discussion, they have an argument, an altercation, and so Monica says, you know what, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go out. And Chandler's like, all right, I'll deal with this later. Chandler being Chandler. And then from there, they go back home, and they don't talk for a couple days. It was 2 days. And then Chandler decides, oh, well, we haven't talked for a while. So he grabs a box, starts putting her sweatshirts, her lipstick that she had left, all her belongings that she had left at his apartment. He put it in a box, knocks on the door, and says, "Hey, here's your stuff back." She's like, "Why?" And he says, "Well, because we had an argument. So we're done, right?" And she says, "Couples argue, Chandler." And he says, "Well, I've never been in a relationship this long to the point that we argue." And she's like, I wonder. And so Chandler, he's like, "Well, we argued. Like, why are we still together?" And he's like, "Couples fight. We need to get through this." And so they have this moment where they hug it out, and it's like an awe moment. And then Monica says something like, "This is what an adult, mature relationship looks like. Welcome, Chandler." And so that's the intro to Chandler. And so this kind of reminds me of the story of Moses and God, because they decided that they were going to have this mature relationship. They were going to go through the rough patches, and neither of them was going to back out. That's what real relationships are. You go through the rough patches and you take the time. Now, it wasn't smooth sailing for them from there. There were still the rough patches to go through. So later on, the people complain again about water. And God says to Moses, listen carefully, he says, "Speak to the rock and water will come out." But Moses decides, just like last time, he's like, "You know what, God? I'm going to strike it just like last time." So he goes up to the rock, strikes it twice, and water comes gushing out. So let's see what the consequences are of that action. "But the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, 'Because you did not trust me enough to demonstrate my holiness to the people of Israel, you will not lead them into the land I am giving them.'" Brutal. God, come on. He just messed up. He just didn't listen. What's the big deal? But here's what either party could have done. Now, Moses could have said, "You know what, God? That's too harsh of a punishment. I'm done with you. I don't have to listen to you anymore because you just banned me from my, the work that you sent me to do." Now, God could have said, "You know what? You didn't listen to me, so I'm going to pick someone else, and you're done." But neither of them did that because they were in it because it was a real relationship. They were both in it because they cared and because they wanted to, not just to see what they could get out of it, right? They both wanted to keep going. It was a sense of mutual perseverance, and they didn't throw each other away. That's what real relationships look like. Now, that perseverance, that mutual sense of perseverance, reflected onto the rest of Moses' life. And we see that 40 years later, if we open up to Deuteronomy 34, 4-6, we see that Moses is coming to the end of his life, and God sends him to the top of Mount Nebo, and he can see the promised land. Now, he can't enter it, because God said, "Do not enter. You cannot enter." But he sees it. All right, do any of you guys have brothers and sisters? I have a brother. My brother's awesome. I love my brother. But I remember as a little kid, sometimes, my brother would get something that I wouldn't. Maybe it was a piece of candy. And I really wanted that piece of candy. I could see him eating that piece of candy. I was like, man, why didn't I get a piece of candy? And that's kind of what I think of when I read this, because I'm like, he was standing and watching the land of milk and honey. It's right there, but he can't enter it. It's kind of like that piece of candy you can't have. But it was this mutual sense of perseverance, and it was a real relationship. So it didn't matter to Moses that he didn't get to enter, so long as he had a relationship with God. Now, let's look at Deuteronomy 34 through 4-6. The Lord said to Moses, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when I said, 'I will give it to your descendants.' I have now allowed you to see it with your own eyes, but you will not enter the land." So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, just as the Lord had said. So he died. But if we look later onto verse 6, the Lord buried him in a valley near Bethpeor in Moab, but to this day, no one knows the exact place. God buried him. Can you just imagine the funeral that took place that day? I mean, it was a funeral thrown by God. Wow, when I read that, it was there were fireworks going on. I was like, wow. And we look later on, and it says, there has never been another prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Now, face to face doesn't mean, I see your face. Because I'm standing up here and I'm seeing all your faces. And they're beautiful, by the way. But it wasn't like that. It wasn't like this artificial, I see your face. It was this, I know the desires of your heart, and I know who you truly are. They knew each other for who they wanted to become and who they were at the moment. And that's what a real relationship is. You know each other for who you really are. Now, if you want real relationships, real senses of community, it takes time. If you want real relationships, if you want real community, you have to go through the rough patches. Now, it's not easy, and it's not going to happen in a year or 2 months. I'm going down from time. But it's not going to happen soon. It's going to take time, but it's totally going to be worth it. Now, here's what I've noticed in my own life. So as many of you guys know, I'm a student at the University of Washington, and as part of not living at home anymore, I had to find a roommate. Now, God blessed me enough that I was blessed with an awesome roommate, but we went to the same high school for 4 years, never once talked to each other, other than the casual, hello, how's it going? Good. You? Good. All right. That's how we knew each other. But then God put us, in the same university, and we lived together. And then I noticed that she would have these ups and downs. And so I remember one day she said, Jess, I'm gonna go see a psychiatrist. I said, all right. So she goes. It was an early morning. And late in the afternoon, she comes back with a CVS bag. And I look at the CVS bag, and all of a sudden I see her that she puts it in the back of the drawer. And she thought I didn't notice, but I did. And so I asked her, I said, so what did they say? And she said, oh, it's just stress. It's nothing. I'll be good. And I said, but they give you meds. Yeah, it's just for stress. What did they give you? At the time, as many of you know, I am majoring in psychology, so the psychologist in me started turning, and I was taking a drugs and psychoanalysis class at the time. So I was like, okay, if I know what drug she got, I can start narrowing down what she got diagnosed with, and then I can start to understand. So that was me starting to think. And so I asked her, I was like, what drug did they give you? And she says, they gave me gabapentin. And I said, all right, I know exactly what's up. So time goes by, and I give her time because I know that when someone is going through mental health issues, struggles, they don't know what's going on. So they can't really tell you what's going on. She couldn't tell me what's going on because she didn't get what was going on. So I said, all right, I'm going to give you some time. And so I noticed that she was, again, having these ups and downs, and I came up to her, I said, hey, what's going on? Nothing, I'm good. Okay. Again, hey, what's going on? I told you, I'm good. All right. Now, this time, I'm like, it's building up. And I'm like, hey, what's going on? I told you, I am good. I will come to you when I am ready. Now, at that point, I noticed that she was frustrated because I just kept on asking. And I was frustrated because she wouldn't tell me. In the back of my mind, I was like, you're my college roommate. You're my best friend. And you're like a sister to me, and you won't tell me what is wrong with you. I was frustrated, but so was she. But then there was this other voice in the back of my mind, and that was the Jesus part of it. And he was telling me, love is patient, love is kind. Give her time. So I said, all right, I'll give her time. So I did. Now, time goes by, and she had a panic attack in one of her classes. And she, I had work late that afternoon, so I came home, and the blinds were closed, and she was in her bed, and I said, oh, my God, this is not good. So I walk in, I open the blinds, I was like, okay. And I tell her, I need to know what's going on. I need you to tell me. And so with tears in her eyes, and I noticed that it was hard for her, she tells me I was diagnosed with PTSD and depression. So I looked at her, and I began to understand so much. Realized I already knew what wrong, but hearing her say it, that hurt a little bit, because that's someone I care about. That's someone I am living with. That is my best friend. That is my sister who is going through this. So I look at her and I said, okay, we're gonna get through this. And we made some changes to our environment so that she could start getting better. We made some changes in our lives just so she could, we could both start growing from there. Now that's a rough patch that we've had to go through, and it's been hard, but it's been so worth it. And this might sound a little bit weird, but I'm so excited for the next rough patches that we have to face, because I know that at the end of the day, we're only going to be stronger because of it. And I know that for sure. Now, in your small groups, you could do something. So whenever you're about to enter to that house, wherever you guys join, wherever you guys meet, right when you're standing outside the house, or right after, before you get out of the car, take a step back, mentally, or maybe physically as well, and think, what can I do for them? What can I do for my brother or sister who is going through this? What can I say? Or maybe I can just listen. Versus, all right, I'm here, y'all. What can I get out of this? I'm ready. No, don't do that. Take that step back and take that time to ask yourself, what can I do for them? See, don't just have this artificial relationship. Don't just try to get something out of it. Try to really get to know those people and invest time in those people to go through the rough patches. Because I tell you something, it is so worth it. If you have this relationship where you're not really sure where it's going, again, take that step back. What can I do for them? What can I say to them, or what can I not say to them? It takes time, and it takes going through the rough patches. Now, I love plants, y'all. I really do. They're my favorite things in the whole wide world, and I just love them. Now, I would be a biologist, but I'm not good at biology. I suck at it. Worst quarter of my life. Anyway, but I brought friends. I'm so excited to be sharing this with you guys. If you guys, it feels bubbly and everything. It's awesome. All right, now to you, these are just two plants, right? And they are no different other than they're different species, different genuses, probably from different times. They're different, but at the end of the day, they're both plants, right? They don't look quite different to you. But what if I told you that this beautiful plant I picked up yesterday at Crafts Warehouse for $12.99. Now, ready for a plot twist? Take a breath, pause for the effect. What if I told you that these are fake? $12.99, they're fake. They look pretty real, right? To me, these plants are night and day on another planet. But what if I told you over here, this here is Benji. Benjamin's his full name, last name, Lyra, of course, because Jessica Lyra, obviously. So that's Benji Lyra. He's pretty awesome. I know him by name, and we've been through a lot together. So Benji, I have to water him, right? Because all plants need water. Now, I'm pretty lucky that Benji doesn't need dirt, but he does need rocks. And every so often, I have to change his rocks because they get dirty and gross, or I have to wash them out. And sometimes, he begins to outgrow his home. And I have to get him a new one, right? And right now, he's starting to grow out of this one, so I'll take care of that later. But, see, Benji, I know him by name. And Benji, whenever I come home to Vancouver, from Seattle, or from Vancouver to Seattle, he comes with me on that train. I make sure he does, or I leave him with a babysitter, plant sitter. I make sure of it because he holds a special place in my heart. Now, he was a gift from my aunt 2 days before I left for college. And ever since, I've been taking care of him. Now, me and Benji, it's not all smooth sailing. We have some struggles. I mean, you can even see now, he's got some dry spots, some rough patches, if you will. But I know exactly why that is, because he's outgrowing this. But we're going to go through that together, right? Because I care about Benji, and I'm not just in it for what he can offer to me. Now, this plant, I tell you, it's going to go back to Crafts Warehouse. I'm getting those $12.99 back because I'm using that for textbooks. This is going back. And it's not going to hurt. I'm actually going to be really happy to send it back because that's money in my pocket and money towards my career. But this, when it starts to outgrow or it begins to dry, or when Benji dies, God forbid, please pray for Benji, I am going to be in tears. I'm actually going to be really sad. And just talking about it gets like this knot in my throat that is, it's like, man, Benji can't die. No, there's so much memories tied to Benji. And so, yeah, it's going to hurt. But this plant, it doesn't mean anything to me. That's like artificial relationships. These artificial relationships, it costs more. But at the end of the day, this real one, it's so much more rewarding, and it fills my life more, and I fill its life more than this one. Now, there's something that my mom always used to say. My mom is where I get my love of plants. When I was a little kid, when I was growing up, and even up to this day where I'm an adult, we plant plants together, and we take care of plants together. And she taught me everything I know. But she used to say something. You would never walk into her house and see a fake plant. Why, you may ask? My mother always used to say, why do you buy those plants? They just don't bring anything into your life. They're trash, they're garbage, they're gonna end up in the corner, and they're just gonna gather dust. You might dust them once a year, but they don't give you anything. Why do you have these fake plants? And so as I was preparing for this, this is what I thought of. And I was like, that's very similar to these fake relationships. They don't give us anything, and when we get rid of them, you don't feel anything, because they were never anything to begin with. So I invite you to dream with me for a second. I challenge you to dream with me for a second. What if we were to be done with these fake, artificial relationships? What if we were just to not even spend the $12.99 on them, and instead begin to nourish and take care of those real relationships, and most importantly, work through the rough patches over time? Just dream with me about that.
That's a powerful word, isn't it? Let's take that truth. Let's go to God with it. Pray with me if you would. As we pray, God, I pray, would you bring to our mind's eye the faces of the people in our lives you've given to us. And as we see them, as their names flash through our minds even now, God, the folks who right now, that the relationship with them it's tough, and it is going through a rough patch, and we're tempted to bail. God, I pray, would you get a hold of our hearts even now? And God, I pray, would you send the strength and power of your Holy Spirit that we would pour into those relationships and work through rough patches? Because God, we want to experience real community, and we know you want us to as well. God, help us. God, as we go into some brand new small groups, Lord, would you give us the patience to invest over time and to give those relationships the time to develop. And Lord, as we begin to say no to the easy, cheap, fake relationships in life, God, would you help us to give ourselves to real relationships and real community? I pray for everyone in this room, and we ask for your blessing of real, life-giving relationships in and through you, Lord Jesus. Jesus, would you help us, lead us, and guide us? We'll trust in you. In your name we pray. Amen.